Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today's video I'm going to start with a trigger warning, just to be sure anyone who is going to watch this that they are aware that I will be talking about pregnancy loss and miscarriage. I feel like it's pretty obvious by the title, but just in case you clicked on this or the video rolled over by accident from another video, I will be talking about miscarriage, pregnancy loss, and how we got through. Although I am currently 21 weeks pregnant with our rainbow baby, this is something that's sort of taken me a while to want to talk about, especially online. It's pretty personal, and obviously it's something that I have had to process and go through by myself. But now that we are so close to meeting our beautiful little rainbow girl baby, I figured now's a great time. So I'm going to try and start at the beginning. I do have a notebook here, which is actually one that I wrote all of the information of the pregnancy in, basically. So how I was feeling, what was going on, also my HCG levels. So if you're not someone who knows a whole lot about pregnancy and stuff, this might be a little bit confusing, but HCG levels are when you go for your first blood test, when you get your little line on your pregnancy stick or your yes, and you go to the doctors, what they're measuring is your HCG level, which is basically the pregnancy hormone. I had symptoms for maybe a week or so. Hayden and I were not trying at this point, but we were not avoiding either. We were sort of like, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. We were being careful sometimes. Other times we weren't being careful. I had been off the pill for maybe 7 months just because I didn't want to be putting any hormones in my body anymore. I was on the mini pill and I just wanted to refresh my body. I had been on it for, I think, 5 years, and to me that was long enough that it was time to come off. I didn't really like the thought of putting something in my body every day. So I came off the pill, I think in the August maybe, and then yeah, this was around March, April, May time. We sort of were like, well, we're not too fast. We were getting married in the September. We sort of thought if it happens, it happens. If not, it doesn't. But I wasn't tracking anything. I wasn't looking at anything other than tracking my periods to just check that they were regular enough. So then I had the symptoms of having really sore boobs for a few days, which is very, very unusual for me. That's not a symptom I get when I get my period. I know a lot of people do, but that's not a symptom that I have ever experienced. Sorry if my hands are moving down here. The dog is begging for pats. So yeah, I had never really had that as a symptom, getting my period or anything, and it was kind of like TMI. This whole video will probably be TMI, but it was like my nipples were razor blades, basically. And I recognized it especially when I put my seatbelt on, because the seatbelt pretty much went straight across. So that's when I sort of thought something was off, but it wasn't quite due for my period yet. So I was like, well, maybe not, who knows. So then a few more days passed and I decided to do a test, and Hayden and I were talking about it, and he was like, I think you're pregnant. And I was like, oh, I don't think so. Like, I think when we had sex, I wouldn't have even been ovulating. Like, you know, I would track when we did, and it was a week later. Like, it wasn't the week that I was ovulating, but we did a few times the week after. And I was like, well, I don't actually think I would have been ovulating then. This is going off the Flow app, by the way. So not me checking my ovulation or anything, but this is just what my app told me, which is where I will give a warning to people that apps are not always accurate, because everyone's body is very different and they go off a pretty standard 28-day cycle with ovulation on day 14, which turns out I do not ovulate on day 14. So yeah, I took a test and I really wasn't sure. Hayden didn't think he could see anything. I sent him some photos, but I had this weird feeling and was like, no, there's a really, really faint line there. I know you can't see it very well, but I think I'm pregnant, but I can't be sure. So then I waited and I did another test the next day, and it was sort of the same thing. Very, very light, but there was definitely something there. And then I did another one the day after, and it was still pretty much the same. So then I booked in an appointment with the doctor, and I went in and I got my bloods done, and then that night they called me with my blood results. And I mean, look, I went to a very rude doctor. It's not someone I've ever been back to since this phone call, because she just had no care, which was very unfortunate. And this happens, a bit of a reoccurring situation, to be honest. So she called me, and when I had gone in the doctor as well, when I did a urine test, it pretty much came up negative on her little stick test, whereas at home, although they had came up very, very light, they were positive at home. So I was a bit confused straight away because she was like, no, there's nothing on this stick test. She just sort of held it up and was like, no, there's nothing there, and put it away. Whereas if you're someone who thinks you might be pregnant, you look at the test for a lot longer than like a quick glance and throwing it in the bin. But obviously, if you're really, really early, your lines are very light. So then she called me that night and she said that my HCG level was only at a 7, meaning it was too early to tell. She said that I was borderline pregnant, which meant they classify anything below 5 as negative, between 5 and 10 or 5 and 20, they classify as borderline pregnant. So that was confusing because I was like, that makes no sense. And at this point I was about 14 or 15 days past ovulation, which I then found out my ovulation would have been a week late. So about 2 weeks past when I would have ovulated and when we would have fallen pregnant. So then I went back again. So this was the 11th of June. Ziggy, get back. So this was the 11th of June. I then went back and got another blood test on the 14th of June. So this is 3 days later, and my levels only went up to 11. Now, for those of you who don't know a whole lot about pregnancy, at this point your levels should pretty much be doubling every 24 to 48 hours. So my levels should have jumped more, basically. I then got another test about 8 days later. My levels had gone up to 70. They told me that that was fine. Now between my test on the 7th and getting my next blood test, which was on the Monday, I started bleeding on the Sunday. So on the Sunday the 14th, I had a little bit of bleeding. I remember so vividly, Hayden and I were at Marion. We were in Big W and I suddenly felt like a wetness that I hadn't peed myself, obviously. I remember being like, I need to go to the toilet right now because something is wet, basically. So then I went to the toilet and I immediately started shaking because I could see that there was blood in my underwear. I then wiped and there was blood. And like, kind of a period amount of blood. So I feel like if I wasn't testing, I would have thought that I had just got my period because it was around the due date of my period. So I would have just thought that I'd got my period. But obviously I had tested and could see that there was a line. So then that night I had a little bit of cramping, and although I had bleeding, it was still lighter than a period. I was nauseous, I still had sore nipples, my boobs became sore, I had a metallic taste in my mouth, I was moody, and my skin was like amazing. So I had a lot of pregnancy symptoms. Ziggy? No. And then, yeah, a couple of, like the next day, I then had more bloods. I told the doctor I had had bleeding and my levels only went up to 11. Now at this point I had changed doctor because I felt really uncomfortable. The bleeding only lasted 48 hours and it was quite light. It wasn't like a period. So then the next week I was tired and emotional and, you know, just classic pregnancy symptoms. And the doctor had said because the bleeding was very short, she figured it was implantation bleeding, and that was that basically, which I think it was. So then my levels went up to 70. When I would pee on the sticks, the lines then started going darker. So I thought, cool, things must actually be fine. That was just a little bit of a freak out for a day or two, but it did get me rattled. And in that time, we had told our family straight away. So there was already an expectation. We'd obviously gotten everyone really excited and we were really excited, and you know, it was kind of scary. I didn't want to let everyone down after we had just had this amazing news. I didn't want to fail, which is how, as much as everyone says that it's not a failure on you or anything, unfortunately there's no way that you can't feel that way. So then the next week I had an ultrasound because they just wanted to check, but they couldn't see anything yet. Now at this point I would have probably only been about 4 weeks, so there was nothing to see anyway. I then had another blood test because they wanted to see how things were going, and my levels had gone up to 270. So they were like, this is great, your levels are going up, practically normal now. It must have just been a slow start and everything is fine. And I was like, cool, that's amazing. But they did want to keep testing me just to double check that things were still going up because it didn't quite seem right. So then the next week I had another ultrasound. My bloods were taken that day and my HCG levels had gone up to 828, and I was like, amazing, that's great. Now knowing a little bit more, I still shouldn't have been booked in for an ultrasound at that point because the sonographer has since told me that they can't really see anything unless your levels are at 1500 or more. So at that point, we were really, really nervous for this scan, and we went and had it, and again, they couldn't see anything. So there was nothing there. But they did find a cyst on my ovaries. They saw nothing and it made me really sad and really let down. I made a lot of notes saying that I just don't understand why this is happening to me. And I felt really anxious and just very sad. Due to them then saying that they could see a cyst on my ovary, my doctor gave me some very dangerous information, basically. Misinformation, might I add. So she basically said to me, since they could see a cyst on my ovary and they couldn't find the pregnancy, I was most likely having an ectopic pregnancy. That's sort of all she said. And then she was like, and we'll just get you back in a few days. I was like, okay, like to do more blood tests. So at this point, I think, okay, so I'm probably having an ectopic pregnancy, which if you don't know is when the egg gets fertilized either in the ovaries or fallopian tubes. These then rupture because they're not in the uterus where they should be, so they rupture and usually you have to have surgery. Often women end up losing an ovary and a fallopian tube, and it obviously then gives less chance of getting pregnant later. It also is quite traumatic if it ruptures and you're not in the hospital getting it removed already. It's very, very painful and just very dangerous. People can die from it. So she had got this idea in my head that I had an ectopic pregnancy and didn't really give me any information on it. So as anyone would when getting given information about something that they don't really know, I obviously went straight to Google and YouTube and did a whole lot of video watching, which at the time I thought it was making me feel better because it was making me more informed, but honestly it just made me more of an anxious mess, and my whole life just revolved around the fact that I was going to have an ectopic pregnancy. That night I then got some really intense cramps and we ended up in the emergency room because I thought I was having an ectopic pregnancy. Might I add, I then was getting blood tests every 2 days, check my levels still. So they went from 828 and then they went to 830. So only up by 2 in 2 days, where at this point they should be doubling. So I should have been at 1600 by that point, at least. But they instead they only went up by 2. My blood test 2 days later came back and they had gone down. So at this point I'm freaking out. I remember I was sitting on the couch and just was like, well, I'm clearly losing this baby. At this point I didn't have any bleeding, but the doctor basically just said, yep, and I had a different doctor this time call me. So my first doctor was useless, my second one gave me misinformation, and this other doctor who just called to give me my results pretty much literally just said, this is your level, if you are in pain, go to the hospital, is all they said. And I had been cramping that day, so I thought we should go to the hospital because I'm in pain. We then got to the hospital, we spent hours and hours there. They were doing blood tests and stuff, they were doing ultrasounds on me, but it was just a doctor, so like not the OB. And then we had an OB come and she spoke to us, and it was just a long sort of traumatic night, and she basically said that we had to wait and see what happens. So then I was booked in for an ultrasound the next Wednesday. So by this point it's been maybe 3 or 4 weeks of this back and forth, not really sure what's happening cycle. Because there was a couple of weeks there where things were like, when my levels were going up, they were like, yep, this is great, your levels are going up, your pregnancy's fine. And then it wasn't for another like week or 10 days until I got the next blood test, which then again showed that they weren't doubling. So for like a couple weeks there, we were in a lot of for a couple of weeks there, we just thought everything was going fine. And then we were, yeah, in this sort of limbo of like, oh, things are great. Or maybe they're not great. Yep, they're amazing. No, things aren't going great. So it was very, very up and down, and we just felt constantly on edge because we didn't know what was going to happen with this baby. So then, yeah, we were in the hospital. She then said to me like, yep, you clearly don't ovulate when you're supposed to, blah, blah, blah. We're going to have to wait. And they gave me another, they told me I had to come back a week later on the Wednesday to get, no, it's gone. Nope. They then told me I had to come back on the Wednesday to get an ultrasound. I went in on the Wednesday and they did an external, so just on my tummy, and then they did an internal and basically showed that there was nothing there. But they also then said that it wasn't ectopic, so that was good, but that I was going to just miscarry naturally is what they said. So at that point I was distraught because we'd sort of been given a lot of false hope throughout the way, like, yeah, things might be fine, it might be, you know, like, yeah, your levels are growing great now, and now they're not, and it was just very confusing for us, I feel, and we were just not really sure what was happening the whole time. And then that day I started bleeding. That's pretty much, in the gist of things, how like a whole month of my life went. We had told a few people, we were very excited. I had to get my dress altered for the wedding because if like this baby was going to be here, my dress wasn't going to fit me, so that changed. I ended up getting offered a job whilst this was happening, so I had to go for meetings whilst I was then miscarrying. I bled on and off for about 3 weeks. It was a constant reminder every time I went to the toilet that it was something we had lost. I really didn't think I was going to cry in this video. I had gone really well. But yeah, I just felt like it was a constant reminder when I went to the toilet every time that we no longer had this little miracle baby that we were expecting. Sorry, I didn't think I was going to cry. I speak really openly about miscarrying, and it's not something that usually makes me emotional. It's probably pregnancy hormones, to be honest, because I cry a lot at the moment. I feel like when you're going through something like pregnancy loss or infertility or anything along those lines, it just makes it so much more evident. It makes it so much more evident how many people around you are experiencing what you wanted to experience. I had, right around when I was miscarrying, we saw a lot of pregnancy announcements, and then around the time that we would have announced, there was a lot of pregnancy announcements, which just makes things 10 times harder, I believe. And I don't wish for anyone to sort of go through this, or, you know, infertility or anything like that, because it just sucks. Ziggy, that's enough. We were, as horrible as it all was, I feel like we got a very easy process, because we did end up miscarrying naturally, but at the time it was like the whole world was ending, and I just would not wish that on anyone. And it was just heartbreaking, like telling my family we weren't giving them a grandchild yet, and telling Hayden's family we weren't giving them, you know, this life that we were hoping to give, was really hard. And I'll talk another time about how it's affected this pregnancy. That's going to be a whole other video, but it definitely has in a lot of ways. If this hadn't happened to us, we wouldn't be having the beautiful girl that we'll be getting in 19 weeks. Everything happens for a reason, and although at the time I was very much like, why is this happening to us? Like, this is so unfair, I don't understand. And you go through so many feelings, and I felt so guilty, and I felt, you know, really bad in myself and blamed myself a lot, which is never a healthy option. And as much as like your friends and stuff are there for you, it's a very lonely time, I found. I've spent a lot of time on my own just being upset and not really confiding in anyone, which I don't really recommend. Yeah, I just think it's a really horrible thing to go through, and for us it was very stressful because we got mixed messages a lot from the health professionals, so we never really knew what was happening. One minute everything was fine, and then it wasn't, and then it was again, and then we were having an ectopic, and then we weren't, and then I ended up in hospital twice whilst miscarrying because I was in so much pain. And yeah, it was just quite a stressful time, but everything that happens has a silver lining, and our beautiful girl will be that. We were very, 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 very lucky that it didn't take us long to conceive again. It took me about 2 months to get my period back after miscarrying because my body had gone through a lot, but after that we were very lucky to get pregnant first cycle, which I will talk about as well in another video at some point, is how we managed to get pregnant so quickly. Obviously a lot of it comes down to luck and genetics and stuff like that, but there are a lot of tools that I used to make sure we were giving ourselves an optimal chance. But yeah, that is the story of the miscarriage that we went through and that I went through. I feel like it really shaped the person I am today, and I can really relate to a lot of people. It's a weird club to be in, a club of people who have experienced loss and pregnancy loss. It's something that if you haven't been through it, it's something you'll never understand. I didn't understand how someone could be so upset of something they maybe didn't know about for very long, but the second you see that you are pregnant, your whole life changes in front of your eyes. I feel like everything I had ever thought changed as soon as I got a pregnancy test that was positive. Our whole life changed. We changed everything we had planned, and so I think, yeah, it's a big thing to go through for anyone. And the statistics are that 1 in 4 go through a miscarriage, so I'm sure you know someone who has. If it's not yourself, one of your friends probably have, or maybe a lot of your friends probably have been through something like this, and they may not talk about it. I have been really, really open about it because I think it makes it easier. When we were then trying for a baby again, people understood, and people are a little bit more careful about what they say, I guess. So for me it was a good thing. I'm glad I was open about it, but not everyone is. It's a very personal thing to go through, and so you might know someone who has been through it and you might not even know that they have been through it. So I guess just always be kind to people because you never know what they're going through behind closed doors. I didn't talk about it till after the fact, so when it was happening only a few people really knew, and it was sort of after it was all over I was more open about talking about it. There's not really much more for me to say. That was the shittest month of my life, I would say, in the past few years. So yeah, I hope this video has opened eyes for you if you did not know much about miscarriages or pregnancy loss. If you are going through this yourself, I promise you it gets better with time. I know I cried today, but I haven't actually cried over it for a long time now, and it's the sort of thing that baby will always be in my heart, but everything happens for some reason or another, and I know that the little girl that I'm growing inside of me now wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the loss that we had. And you know, I think it brought Hayden and I closer. We've gone through something really, really hard as a couple and came out the other end of it stronger than ever. I've appreciated this pregnancy the second time around so much more than I think I ever would have before. I worry a lot more, and there's a whole bunch of things I will talk about regarding that another time, but I definitely think that I'm more appreciative than ever that I can get pregnant, that I've been able to be pregnant, that I can carry this baby, and that I get to become a mum at the end of the day. So yeah, I think just be careful when you're talking to people and asking people when they're planning on starting a family and stuff, because you never know what people could be going through. You could literally say that to someone who could be miscarrying right that second, or is struggling with infertility and has been trying for months and months and months and still isn't getting anywhere, or is going through IVF, or, you know, there's so many things that people just need to be careful about. So I'm going to wrap the video up here because I've been talking for a very long time, as I expected I would, and I hope you enjoyed this. please give the video a thumbs up if you did enjoy, subscribe if you are not already, and I'll see you in my next video, which will be a normal vlog. Bye.